The following video will provide instructions for accessing and cleaning the motor armature commutator on the HE&M NG120, NG120XL, ABS NG120, NG160, or ABS NG160 utility bandsaw. If the motor will not start, runs sluggish, only starts when the arm is up, or possibly even sparks are visible through the vents in the motor cover, it is possible that there is a glaze on the part of the motor where the motor brushes make contact with the armature, called the commutator. This is a relatively easy repair, and this video will provide step-by-step instructions on cleaning the commutator. First, verify that electrical power is disconnected from the saw. Because the process involves accessing some electrical components, electrical shock can occur if the saw remains under electrical power during the procedure. Use the screwdriver to remove the screws that fasten the speed regulator cover and remove the cover and set it aside. Next, remove the screws that attach the speed regulator to the motor housing. The wires to the speed regulator do not need to be disconnected. Use a small screwdriver to gently pry the fan up and off of the motor shaft and set it aside. The motor cover can now be removed from the motor housing base by removing the screws and lifting the motor cover off of the motor. The armature will now be exposed, and the motor brushes will be accessible. These solid carbon motor brushes should also be cleaned. There are two motor brushes, one on each side of the motor. Gently lift the copper wire leads up off of the top of the armature housing on each side of the motor. The brushes are held in the brush housing with a retainer spring that presses against the exposed end of the motor brush. Gently lift the end of the spring that is resting against the end of each motor brush and lift it up above the brush housing where it can be set on the edge of the armature housing. With the retainer spring moved, gently pull the brushes out of the brush housing on each side of the motor. The end of the motor brush that makes contact with the commutator will have a curved surface. This curved surface, like the copper commutator, will have a glaze on the surface, and it should also be cleaned. Gently clean the curved end of the carbon motor brush using a fine grit abrasive cloth. To clean the commutator, the armature shaft can be spun by hand while holding a piece of fine abrasive cloth folded to fit into the housing. A variable speed drill set to slow speed will work to turn the shaft as well and makes the job easier. It is not necessary to clean the copper plates on the commutator until perfectly shiny, but remove enough of the black glaze to show an appreciable improvement. Once the commutator is sufficiently clean, reinstall the carbon motor brushes. Return the spring retainers to secure the brushes against the commutator, and then lift the copper wire leads back up to the top of the edge of the armature housing. After the motor brushes have been reinstalled, it is advisable to use compressed air to blow the armature and motor housing out to remove any loose carbon dust that has collected. Reinstall the motor cover, being careful not to pinch any of the wires. After securing the motor cover with the fastener screws, reinstall the fan by pressing it onto the armature shaft. Spin the fan by hand and check that it is not binding or scraping against the motor housing. Reinstall the speed regulator and fastener screws, and reinstall the speed regulator cover, being careful that the wires are not pinched between the cover and the speed regulator. Reconnect the electrical supply and turn the power switch to the on position. Test the motor by pulling the motor trigger switch located on the handle with the arm in the up position and again when it is down. If there are still problems with the motor, contact your HE&M utility saw representative.